Welcome to the Hockey Writers Prospect Corner, a show with our top prospects writing crew, bringing you the latest news, analysis, scouting reports, mocks, rankings, and much more. From the World Juniors to the NHL draft floor, from the farm to the NHL, our team covers everything that happens in the world of prospects. So sit back, grab a notebook, and get ready for Prospect Corner. Prospect Corner.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Prospect Corner here at the Hockey Writers. I'm your host, Matthew Zator, and as always, joined in by prospect experts Peter Baracchini and Dayton Reimer. Guys, we're getting closer and closer to the World Juniors, and we've been going through our rosters here, and this won't be a predictions one for Team Sweden. This is a final roster that was published, a couple of days ago. Sweden announced that they've put out their final roster. I want to say it's early for them. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's usually closer to the tournament they put out their final, but they've got their team, so they're ready to go. And so we're going to go through their roster a little later on the show. But first, we're going to talk about Team Canada and Team USA's camp rosters. They're usually later on getting their final rosters together because they got the pre-tournament games and stuff like that. They kind of look through to get their final rosters together, but they did put out their camp ones, and there were some notable omissions, I'll say. I mean, we talked about Canada having a few different guys that are not on this camp roster, so we'll start with Canada. Peter, I'll start with you. Who did you expect to be on this roster that's not even on the preliminary one, let alone the final?
Yeah, a couple of names stood out. I was going to say THW, but it became known that he did have hip surgery and he is out for the season. So there's a big reason why he wasn't added to the roster, because he was dealing with surgery, and wish him the best, because I think that if he was healthy and he didn't have to have surgery on anything, there was a pretty good chance I think he would have been on that roster, on that camp selection. And I have no doubt that he probably would have made an immediate impact based on what he did at the U18s last year. Still young. I know there's going to be another chance for him next year. A little bit of disappointment this time, but there is a little bit of clarification as to why now. But overall, I think Beckett Seneca probably could have gotten a camp invite. I think there was a lot of discourse or talk about why didn't get one or both puck moving defenders in Zane Parekh or Carter Yakimchuk, but I think we know the direction that Team Canada wants to go in with their defense right now. Be a little bit mobile, be a little bit big, but have that two-way game where you can jump into the offense, but be smart within your own zone. Still reservations about Parekh and Yakimchuk's defensive play. But they got mobility on the back end. They got the size, they got the strength, so that's good. But I think those are the main ones that really kind of stood out in terms of prominent names, because not seeing Beckett Seneca, who has been on an absolute tear this season in junior. I mean, I think he just had a recent 4 or 5 point game. I'm gonna have to double check that, and he's just been lighting it up. So, really big. Some big names omitted. Is it a surprise? Possibly, but given how Team Canada wants to have a direction going forward, it does make sense.
I mean, they can put together 3 rosters and be pretty competitive anyway. But yeah, I was surprised with Beckett Seneca for sure, because of how well he's done. Michael Misa was another one that I thought was a really big omission, although they're already taking a couple underage guys. In this preliminary one, not necessarily going to be on the final roster, but Misa was a big surprise of how he's dominated the OHL this season. It's kind of interesting why he didn't even just get an invite to the camp. I mean, give him a chance to maybe compete for the final roster, but like I said, they have a direction. They have the guys that are on it, and they feel will give him a good chance of winning, and we'll see how it goes from there. Dayton, what about you? Anyone that kind of stood out? I know you went through and talked about Yakimchuk's omission on Senators Roundtable, but anyone else that you kind of were surprised didn't even get an invite?
Yeah, there's a good number. Being more kind of WHL focused, I was surprised that Prasek didn't at least get an invite. Yeah, there are questions about his defense, but not even extending the invitation to bring him in, see what he has, then send him home if you need to, right? And it's always tough when the camp roster is so restrictive. But a couple other guys, Clark Caswell, he's having a great season with the Swift Current Broncos. Would have liked to see him get an invite. Terrence Smith with the Everett Silvertips, he's a defenseman. Really tough with the defense, of course, because Canada does have a really good core. Would have liked to see him, but he's on the smaller side, I guess. Over in the OHL, like you said, Michael Misa. How about Luke Misa? He's having a pretty good season. Great speed. Nick Lardis, Beckett Seneca, Kyle Greentree. Greentree, I
Yeah,
think I was maybe the most surprised. Like that's a pretty typical Canadian hockey player, right?
yeah.
He's in the front of the net. He goes to the corners. He plays a grittier game while still scoring a ton of goals. So really surprised with that one. And then also a little bit of the QMJHL ignorance, if you want to say it that way, sort of pushed them to the side. I think only two, if I'm looking at this list right. Yeah, only two QMJHL players got an invite. So not even guaranteed to make the team. And that's Matthew Cataford and Ethan Gauthier.
Hmm.
So why not bring in the two really talented prospects, Justin Carbonneau and Caleb Desnoyers? That would have been great to see. They're having great seasons, going to be pretty high picks this year. Alexandre Blais, he's having a good season. He's over a point per game with the Rimouski Oceanic. Or Etienne Morin with the Moncton Wildcats. He's over a point per game as a defenseman.
Hmm.
Not even getting an invite. That's to me, that's a little insulting. Um, you have to be a little bit more balanced, I think. Uh, I'm not saying that you have to bring in an even number from each league. Sometimes you're going to have weaker leagues. That's just how it works. But only inviting two QMJHLers, I don't know. There's more guys who should have been able to get a shot.
True, and I mean it's tough when there's just such a limited amount of space, and even for the invites for the selection camp, it is interesting to see the guys that are left off and the guys that are on there. So quickly, Peter, did you see anyone on this camp roster that you didn't expect to be on here?
Yeah, a couple. Given how there were like a lot of quality forwards still available, and even some of the names that Dayton mentioned from the QW, I'm kind of surprised that Luca Pinelli was on there. I felt like there would have been, and even the names like I mentioned, like in Becca Seneca before, I would have thought that maybe there was a little bit more upside, or even a few players that probably would have been a little bit more deserving than Pinelli. Cameron Allen and Bo Akey. I mean, we talked about how in his draft year, Cam Allen was inconsistent. He's dealt with injuries. Bo Akey has dealt with injuries as well. You don't know where they are. I mean, they've been pretty decent, okay so far, health wise. But I think their D is pretty much set, so they're probably on the outside looking in. But you probably could have had a little bit more competition with some other names on the back end as well. Um, yeah, so those are a few names that really stood out for me. That really again, there were probably a few more other names that were probably more deserving than those ones that probably should have gotten invited to the camp other than them.
Didn't you have anyone that you were surprised to be on here?
Um, I guess a few that were surprising, but not undeserving, if that's fair. Sawyer Minio, didn't expect to see him there. Definitely deserves a spot. Like
Yeah.
he's having a great season. Matthew Cataford, did not expect to see him there. He's never been like one of the top prospects. He's kind
Mm.
of flown under the radar, giving him that acknowledgement that he is one of the best in Canada. Very deserving.
Yeah.
Um, Luca Pinelli, a little bit surprising. I would have if you need to invite a little guy who scores goals, why not Justin Poirier in the
Yeah.
QMJHL?
Yep.
He's my favorite. He's so good. I loved watching him last season in prep for the draft, and then was just crushed when no one would take him until what, the fifth round? Insulting. How dare you? Yeah, fifth round, 156th. And of course, Carolina grabbed him.
Yeah.
Bo Akey, didn't expect to see him there. He's having a great season. Definitely bring him in. Harrison Brunnick, that's a guy I didn't expect to see, but he definitely deserves the recognition as a top prospect because he's very good and just has flown under the radar on a really weaker Kamloops team, at least last season. I think they're doing a little bit better now, but yeah, it's for the most part, when I'm talking about guys I would have liked to have there, I don't know who I would remove. It's it's tough, you know. There's maybe like one or two guys that I would say, maybe I would replace you with someone else. Like, do you remove Andrew Gibson? He's more of a defensive guy, but then you're losing that defensive side.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I don't know. It's like you mentioned at the start, Matt. It's you have enough for 2 to 3 rosters here who all could be pretty competitive
Yeah.
in in the tournament. So it's you pick who you think is going to work the best together and you see how it goes.
Yeah, we'll see if they can put together a roster that can get to the medal rounds at least this time, rather than last year's quite disappointing. They didn't even get a chance for a medal for sure. All right, well, we'll talk a little more Team Canada when they get their final roster out. But we've talked a lot about Canada. Let's go to the US. And they had some names that were off their roster, their camp roster as well. And Dayton, did you see who should have been on that one?
It's a little bit tougher for the US. I think looking at their roster, it looks a little bit more like they took most of the best guys coming from the CHL and NCAA.
Mm.
There are definitely some big misses. I think more so on the defense. Oh, I've blanking on his name. Jake Fisher? Is that it?
Lucas Fisher, maybe?
Luke, yeah, maybe. He was one that I've really liked watching, but didn't quite make the cut on the preliminary roster. Will Scahan, he's not on the list. Camille Bednarik, Will Whitelaw, those are guys that I thought might have got an invite. Max Swanson,
Mm.
Jason Shagabe, he didn't make the team. All of those guys are having decent seasons, but nothing that I think would force any of the guys who are on the preliminary roster off.
Peter, do you have anyone that was a snub, I guess?
Yeah, and that I'm going back to Quentin Musty. I
Yeah.
mean, kind of a bit of a surprise considering that, he played for the team with the Hellenic Gretzky Cup in 2022-23. Coming off a 100-point season. I know there was that whole trade scenario with the Sudbury Wolves, but still playing right now, and he's got 20 points in 11 games. I mean, this is an absolute dynamic power forward with a great playmaking ability. He's got a lot of tools and a lot of assets to his game where he has the size, he has the awareness, the hands. Um, it just seems kind of odd to leave him off again when he was just so dominant last year and he's being dominant again this time around. So, um, one of the biggest snubs for me, I think that's pretty much a given, but um, there was word that he wasn't going to be included anyways, but to still not include him, I think that's just a big question mark on my from my perspective.
Yeah, Musty is probably a pretty big name to be left off this list for sure. And to not even get an invite is kind of interesting. Yeah, so I mean, USA, I don't know, there's not a lot of, not like Canada, where there's quite a few. But yeah, they're gonna have a pretty strong team. We'll talk about their final roster too, once they release theirs.
I definitely forgot about Quentin Musty. He should have got an invite. He just, you're scrolling down the stat lists, right? And he's not near the top. And it's like, oh, yeah, he's got almost 2 points a game. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's gonna
And if
almost hit
there's
100 again.
I was just about to say, there's also going to be this whole OHL slash, NTDP discourse of
Yeah.
players that have come up through the system. I mean, Joey Willis from the Saginaw Spirit got an invite, and he plays in the OHL for the Saginaw Spirit, and he's got 32 points in 26 games. So, if to go back to back years without one of the top productive players in the OHL, it does raise a little bit more questions.
Yeah, we'll see if that comes back to bite them.
Yeah. And
Once
before we move on, I completely forgot it, and I would be amiss to not mention it. Evan Gardner from the Saskatoon Blades should have got an invite for Canada. The goalie, he is leading the league in save percentage. Also has 20 games at 13 wins.
yeah,
That's That's 4 places better than Carson Bjarnason, who is expected to be the starter. And that is 14 spots better than Scott Ratzlaff, who is the returner. He should have got an invite.
Mhm.
That probably because of how he's had his the great season
Mhm.
so far. So at least an invite. Like, come
At
on.
least an invite. Yeah.
We'll see if that comes back to bite them too, with what the goaltending looks like throughout the tournament. All right, well, let's talk about a team that has released its final roster, and that's Team Sweden. They did submit their final roster last year first as well. So, I mean, they're usually, at least the last couple of years, have been really early with that. So, they've got 19 drafted players on this final roster. So, pretty veteran group, so they've lots of drafted guys, and usually they do bring a lot of those guys. They didn't bring anyone really substantial from the 2025 coming up here. But they're a veteran group. So we'll see if they can actually win a gold this time. They haven't done that in a long time, since 2012, which is quite a while ago. But they do have a team to do it this time. So let's start with their forwards, which has a lot of firepower, even though they are missing a lot of their guys that were. Jonathan Lekkerimäki is a big name that they're not going to have this year. Some other guys that have moved on too that were big parts of their teams, but they've got some pretty good talent to replace them. So I'll start with you, Dayton. What do you think about the forward group that they're bringing this year?
It's pretty solid. Excuse me. Definitely a lot of talent. I do think there is some space for younger guys to sneak up and grab spots. But they're going to be relying really heavily on guys like Otto Stenberg, David Edstrom, Felix Ungersorum, Anton Wahlberg. Those are going to be their heavy hitters. Uh, Last year, I believe Stenberg led the team in points. Let me just check that really quick. Oh, Lekkerimäki led. Stenberg was second, so he had 9 points in 7 games. 5 goals, though, so he's going to be looking to build on that. Felix Ungersorum was just behind him with 6 points in 7 games. Yeah, those guys are going to be your top guys. David Edstrom, not as much of an offensive total last season, but he was also competing with some other very talented players. So he's going to be probably their top center heading in. If they push Stenberg to the left wing, we'll see.
Peter, what about you? Do you see about this forward group that Sweden's bringing? It is a pretty impressive one. I mean, like I say, lots of drafted guys on here.
Mhm. Yeah, they're going for that. Not necessarily, but they got the experience from last year, but also players that are playing at like, a high level right now. I know you look at Felix Ungersorum with the Chicago Wolves playing in the AHL right now, who's
Mhm.
looked really good. I believe he stood out very well for Team Sweden at the World Hockey Championships. Um, you got a lot of players that came up from that U18 system, Jack Berglund, Anton Wahlberg. Um, there again, this is Linus Eriksson. This is a very, very deep forward group. Maybe no high impact forward unless you're maybe looking at 2025 overall pick Victor Eklund, who, just like his brother, we know how shifty and creative that he can be. Looks to maybe have a little bit more upside, possibly. So, to see potential draft pick or a potential high draft pick make the team right now, it's very impressive. Unfortunately, there's no Anton Frundell. He's going to be at the Junior A Championship. I probably would have liked to have seen him there, but you know what? It's just how the roster played out. But yeah, depth that they have, the forwards that they're bringing back, even up front from last year, the overall impact that they can bring. Again, no game changing prospect, kind of like a Lekkerimäki, but you have a lot of hard work and players that could change the tide of the game with their work ethic and their ability to get on the forecheck, play a heavy game, and attack the middle. So they got that going for them this time.
Yeah, one thing they do have a lot of that skill, even though they don't have Lekkerimäki. Not really high end guys, but very solid group overall. Unger Sorm, yeah, has been very impressive so far in his pro career. And again, a Hurricanes draft pick. They just keep getting him. And he's going to be a guy that's going to be and he's we've talked about him on this show in the past being very good two-way forward, could potentially, he's already showing it that he could potentially be in the NHL a lot sooner than some of these other guys. And he's one step away. I mean, he's a call up away, really, to be on the Hurricanes, right? So, and he had a really good preseason, from what I remember, too. So we'll see how he impacts this roster. Well, speaking of high impact guys on defense, they've got quite a few. That's headlined by Axel Sandin-Pellikka and Tom Willander, Theo Lindstein as well. So they got the big three there of really good defensemen. It's probably going to take the bulk of the minutes. Peter, what do you think about this defense? This is probably their strength.
Yeah, and there was always some question marks in the past about what their defense is going to be like, because you had some high impact players, you just never quite got the consistency, but you got a good balance in terms of mobility, shutdown guys, players that know their role. And when you're going to look at Sandin-Pellikka, Lindstein, and Willander, you know what their impact and what their role is going to be, especially on the back end. Like, you could easily have rebalance pairings of possibly one of each on each one, or, pair one of the other on a top pair, on a second pair. So you're going to have that depth up most likely in the top four. And then you have everyone else fill out the gaps after that. So there's a great balance in terms of mobility, um, the smarts and all of that. Again, the big question marks has always been their defense. It's something that I've always noticed recently, but now that you have some of those returning players that are sticking around, a name that I look to is Viggo Gustafsson as well. And Daniel Moyle mentioned him or highlighted him in his final roster. He's one of those players that can provide a very, steady or complementary type of game to those of like a Lindstein or an Axel Sandin-Pellikka, who have a little bit more offense to them. Same with Willander. So they got that balance going for them. And that was the big thing, or one of the big takeaways for me.
Yeah, it's a very balanced group, and Villander's had a great season in the NCAA, being pretty much their number one defenseman. It's a lot of minutes. He's been playing nine points in 14 games with Boston University. So I mean, he's been really good, and of course, he was pretty much a lock to be on this team. I think it didn't really matter how his season went, but he's definitely deserving of being there for how he's been playing. And we all know what Axel Sandin-Pellikka can do, and he's having a great season in the SHL again too. So I we'll see how they impact the game. Dane, you have anything else to add about Sweden's defense?
I think yeah, like you said, it's going to be the part of the team that they rely on heavily, because it is just so solid. It's very, very deep. They have three guys who are going to be kind of big minute munchers, and then a lot of the other ones could step up if anything goes wrong. It's a very, very good defense. And it kind of reminds me of some of the older teams, who like always kind of relied on their defense. Their offense maybe wasn't as strong. I'm thinking kind of back to like 2019, 2020, 2021. There was a Swedish defenseman selected as one of the best of the tournament. So
Yeah.
like it's a strength that Sweden's had for a long time, and it looks like this is almost a return to that. But they also have some forwards who could help them out. So it's a good balanced team. I just wonder, maybe they're going to lead with defense again.
Yeah.
I could very much see that, a little bit of a change from last year, but they have the talent to do so. Axel Sandin-Pellikka is top 10 in SHL scoring.
Yeah.
By the way. He's 19. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, the Red Wings are waiting for him, that's for sure. Have the Twin Towers up, not Twin Towers, he's not a massive defensive, but I mean, twin, with Edmondson there with Sandin-Pellikka. That's a pretty good two to build a defense around. And then, of course, they got Moritz Seider there already. Yeah, we'll see how they play with that defense. And Willander, I've been impressed by him, well, since the Canucks drafted him. And this time, there's only one Canuck on Sweden. They had three last World Juniors: Elias Pettersson, and then of course Lekkerimäki. So only Willander this time. All right, let's talk about their goaltending. This has always been something that has been not as big with the names, but they've had pretty solid performances from their goaltending in the past. Dayton, what do you think about the three guys that they named to their roster in the crease?
Yeah, really interesting group. I don't think that there's a clear-cut starter. I think heading in, now I'm just blanking on names. Who was on the team last year? I think that was Melker Thelen.
He's the only returning goaltender
Yeah.
from last
Yes,
year.
okay. Their names are just similar enough for me to doubt my memory. Melker, Melvin, and Marcus. One of them was coming back. Anyways, he's probably going to be given the first starts, but his numbers haven't been fantastic this year. They've been good, like not trying to discredit anything that he's done. He's got a 917 save percentage in the J20, a 906 in the Allsvenskan. He's got more of a winning record with the Allsvenskan, 8-1 as opposed to the 1-2 with the J20s. His international totals pretty solid as well, a 929 save percentage, undefeated with a shutout. So he's probably going to start as the top guy. But Melvin Strahl, who is 6'3", just so we know, he has the highest save percentage in international competition yet so far, with a 944 in 2 games. He does have a loss as one of those, so one of those games was absolutely incredible, just based on that. And then Marcus Gidlof is 6'6" and has some pretty solid numbers in the SHL with a 915. That's pretty good. 935 in a J20. International, not so good. He's like all of those guys to me could become a starting goaltender. If one of them slips, throw another one in, it's good to go. It's I don't know if there's any game breakers in that group, but it's definitely a reliable group.
I think that's all they're probably going to need with the defense in front of them. So, I mean, as long as they just make the saves that they need to, really. They're all drafted goaltenders. Thelen, Utah Hockey Club. Strahl was the Blue Jackets, and Marcus Gidloff, Islanders. So they're all guys that have been drafted in the NHL. So, all like you said, have some pretty good numbers. So we'll see who takes the job once the games start going. Peter, what do you think about the goaltenders?
Yeah, I mean, compared to past years, you always have like this one standout in goal, whether the upside was high where you have a Jesper Wallstedt, or it's just enough to get by with a was it Hugo Havelid? I know that there were 2 Havelids last season. I think it was Hugo.
Yeah, it sounds right. Yeah.
If it was the last, I'll double check on that because I'm kind of drawing a blank. But you always have, they always seem to have goaltenders that always thrive internationally. And, with the other names here, aside from Thielen, who has the most experience internationally, Strong, Gidloff really don't have that resume to them, but they're strong in their respective leagues. So they got that going for them. And if they could play at a high level or, get the results that they're having right now, that should be a good sign for them going forward. And I agree with Dayton that I think that Thielen is penciled in as a starter, but it wouldn't surprise me if, let's say, Gidloff or even Strahl have a standout performance, or they look great in camp and they get more opportunities to try and say, hey, you know what, we really like your game. We want to see what more you could do if they play well during the pre-tournament games in the tune-up for the tournament. And as the tournament progresses, one of them can easily take over. So again, there's really no clear-cut number one where you did have it in the past. Again, like Wallstedt, like Havelid. Again, a little bit more wary, and maybe you don't have the experience compared to that of USA, where you do have Trey Augustine coming back, which is a big addition for Team USA. But that's what the tournament is all about. You have these unsung heroes that can push a team over the top, and if there's any one team that can have those type of players do it, it's definitely Team Sweden.
Yeah, and it was Havelid that was last year.
Yeah,
1.77 goals against average, 917 save percentage. So I mean, yeah, he was pretty good for Sweden last year, and I mean, like I say, I think all they really need is a goaltender that can just make some saves. and hopefully win a gold rather than the silver last season. If they can make it back to the gold medal game, they've always had problems getting to that point. They dominate the group stages. We all know that. Just having that problem getting into that medals. And last year they broke through. So we'll see if they can keep it going for this year, although they will have some competition with the US and Canada, hopefully, this year too. For Canada's sake, because it is in Canada this year. We want them to be in at least the medals to see how they do. All right. Well, that's Team Sweden. We'll see how they perform. And we'll do our predictions later on once all the other rosters are released and we know what the other teams are going to be like going up against them. But I think they're going to have a pretty good chance of getting back to the medal rounds for sure. All right, let's finish our show with our prospects of the week, and I'll start with you, Dayton. Who do you got to highlight this week?
All right. Well, I don't mean to repeat myself by stealing my Senators prospect of the week, but the one I picked had an incredible last week. That's Bryce Montgomery with the London Knights. 8 points in 3 games, 4 of which were goals. He just turned it on and went off on a streak to like, I don't know. I don't remember seeing that kind of streak in junior for quite a while. He is really clicking in the OHL. He started the season with the Lincoln Stars of the USHL, was one of the first to join the OHL following the agreement with the NCAA, who chose to not ban CHL players from college eligibility anymore. And yeah, little bit of a slow start, but he always had the size, he had the speed, he had the skill. It was going to work in the OHL, and now it is. He's doing amazing with the London Knights organization, an organization where his brother previously played, Bryce Montgomery, who was drafted by the Canes a couple of years ago. Can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but yeah, good for him. And he is my prospect of the week.
Yeah, he's been amazing to start for sure. Hopefully the OHL gives us some images eventually of him here. I haven't been able to find one yet. All right, Peter, who do you got as your prospect of the week?
It's very rare that I'm a homer on when it comes to the prospect of the week, but I'm going to do something rare and be a double homer because of the fact that it's hard to overlook what Easton Cowan is doing in the OHL right now. 55 games with a point dating back to last season and basically tied Doug Gilmour's record for 55 consecutive games with a point in the OHL. So, absolutely impressive that he's able to continue this stretch of production for a full year right now. Continued into the playoffs, ended in the playoffs, but the regular season streak is still alive. So congrats to him. It is absolutely impressive. And no matter which prospect or which team or affiliation they are, you got to tip your hat to it. It's just absolutely amazing to see. And the other one I'm going to give to is Fraser Minton. Coming up in a tough situation where the Maple Leafs are dealing with injuries. He has come in and has produced 4 points in 5 games, including his first 2 goals of his NHL career, one against the Vegas Golden Knights, absolute snipe and feed from William Nylander. But also, when the Maple Leafs weren't playing well against the Chicago Blackhawks and they scored a goal, he answered back quickly. So the fact that he was able to come in, produce in a bottom 6 role, but also give them the type of player that they need that's very smart, opportunistic, and reads the game very well, given the amount of injuries that they had up front. The whole entire team is just absolutely, amazed at how well he's transitioned and how well he's composed himself, because they're saying that he plays like a veteran right now. And that's been the moniker of his career from the WHL up right now, of how well he's able to adapt, and he's adapting to the NHL very well. So, small sample, want to see more. And if he does, 4 points in 6 games. Sorry, I was looking at his AHL numbers accidentally. 1 game, doesn't matter. But at the same time, if he's playing this well, there's a good opportunity that he may not get sent back, because if the GM loves him, if the coach loves him, the teammates love him, you got to keep him up because he's doing his job very well. So Easton Cowan, Fraser Minton, 1A, 1B prospect of the week.
Yeah, definitely has been really good in the NHL for the Maple Leafs to start, and giving them some tough decisions to make as everyone, people get healthy and stuff like that. So we'll see how the rest of the season goes.
Former Saskatoon Blade.
Yeah.
Fraser mentioned.
Saskatoon Blade, yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
He was so much fun to watch.
Mhm.
Just a guy who could like be anywhere and make things happen. If he was on the ice for overtime, it was going in the net. Like there was no question. I think I saw him score or at least assist 2 or 3 overtime goals last season. He was so good. Yeah.
Mhm.
Glad he's doing great in Toronto.
There you go. I'll keep the Homer going here, and I'll talk about Max Sasson, who's in with the Canucks last bunch of games here. He's had 5 games now. He had an assist in his first 2 games, but hasn't had a point since. But he's been really good in bottom 6 role, 4th line, mostly playing there. Good energy guy, and his first ever assist he had it was a great play where he stopped up and passed it to Teddy Bluger, who scored. And then he was just played against the Red Wings and had like 150 people in the stands because former Western Michigan University. And I believe he is from Michigan too. That's why they had so many people in the stands, or he had so many people in the stands. Didn't get a point in that game, but it would have been great for him to score his first NHL goal there. I had, again, undrafted. I signed out of the NCAA, like I said, from Western Michigan, and had a great season last year in his first full season in the AHL, 42 points in 56 games. Has 9 points in 16 games in the AHL this season. I can see him as a really good 3rd, 4th line energy player in the NHL, and he's already shown it pretty well so far. So Max Sasson is my prospect of the week. All right. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Dayton, for coming on, talking prospects as always. Make sure to check out everything at thehockeywriters.com as we keep marching towards the World Juniors in Ottawa this year. And we'll have all the coverage there as the final rosters keep getting released and once the games get started. And then right after that, it's full on draft mode, 2025 draft coming in. And that's when we kind of switch to that full time. And we'll be talking a lot about that again on this show and then, of course, on the site. But until our next episode, we will see you next time.